Aloha. Welcome to Americans Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host, and today's title is Trump's DOGE Will Hurt. Coming to your small town soon. DOGE, D-O-G-E, stands for the Department of Government Efficiency. Not surprising, well, actually very surprising that Elon Musk, a billionaire, and Vivek Ramaswamy have been tapped to lead the recommendations for all the cuts in government, be it social programs, national programs, all the cuts will come from recommendations from Elon Musk and Mr. Ramaswamy. But, cuts to government's not new. Ronald Reagan comes to mind as far as his campaign platform on cutting waste out of government. Particularly when he did become president, we saw massive cuts to the food stamp program, now known as SNAP, federal education programs, Medicaid, and some parts to Social Security, amongst other areas. So again, these cuts are not new, but what is different this time around is we have two billionaires making those recommendations for Congress. And these cuts range anything from as simple as making employees return back to the office, no more telework programs, for Social Security, GSA, federal agencies, is to get them out of their homes and back into the office, to things as large as eliminating complete agencies such as the Department of Education, Department of Energy. So these issues will impact Americans. Maybe the elimination of some of these agencies won't be felt by middle America, small town America, but I guarantee you cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid will affect them. And so to discuss about these cuts and these targets of cuts, here with me is my esteemed guest, Ben Javis, and my co-host, Jay Fidell. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Jay, let's go straight to you on this. Like I said, Ramaswamy and Musk, they're going to come up with all these cuts. Musk says it's going to be $2 trillion, and Ramaswamy thinks it's around $500 billion, a vast difference of proposed cuts. But here's the question. These two gentlemen are not being appointed to any agency or cabinet positions. They will not go through any advice and consent from the Senate. So what real authority do they have? And are we overly concerned about the recommendations they come up with?
I don't think we're overly concerned. They're getting a lot of media, and Trump is essentially saying he would follow their advice or take it seriously. And they won't be confirmed. They won't be in a government agency that was established by law by Congress. They'll just do their thing, and Trump will follow their thing. It's really hideous because what it does is it allows him to accept the things that he thinks are politically viable. I'm not sure if any of them are, but he could accept them or he could reject them. He retains deniability. Very smart, very, very careful, clever kind of political move. But the possibility exists that he will accept most or all of them. And this should be of great concern to all Americans. These guys, can you imagine, both very wealthy, and they're making an attack on middle America. They're trying to destroy the country. That's what I get. Since the time that we had our last show, Tim and Ben, you've been thinking about this. Last time we talked about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And I concluded that, that was going to lead to poverty and undermining public health and early deaths for Americans. Our numbers aren't that good on public health now. This will make it much, much worse. And so, I was thinking about what else the things you listed just now are going to do. And they are very revealing. They let us connect the dots about what these guys are about. First of all, and I'm just going down a list that I made based on your list, the military takes a hit. It takes a hit in morale. If there's no Veterans Administration, gee whiz. And how about all those benefits? Gee whiz. Would I serve? Would I think the government cares about me? The country cares about me? The other thing is ignorance. They seem to be going for public ignorance, and that's we're ignorant enough as it is. I mean, the people who voted for him were ignorant, and now what we have is an attempt to make the country more ignorant, and that means a lack of understanding about civic responsibility, the duties of a citizen, the three branches of government, democracy in general. Knocking off NOAA. What about, yes, you said, what about climate change? What about, weather and extreme weather and storms and the like? This agency is very important to deal with that. And these guys are, they treat climate change as a hoax. That's what it tells me. And that will be very destructive to the country. They want to knock off Planned Parenthood. They want to, support the whole abortion initiative or anti-abortion initiative. Also very troubling, socially troubling, an attack on the social safety net, an advance of the anti-abortion movement. Okay, and then we have, suffering and death for the poor. We have the erosion, if not the end of the middle class, and prospects for success by the middle class in this country. What we have, if you connect the dots on all of the things you mentioned, is we have an oligarchy where the rich are on top of the poor and they control everything, and they don't pay taxes like the poor does. We have the destruction of America as a civil society. We have a direct channel to being a third world country, because that's what would happen. And I'm throwing this out for your consideration and your comments. We're talking about craziness. We're talking about evil. We're talking about the inmates running the asylum. So when you connect all the dots on all these points that you mentioned, Tim, you get a very dark picture.
All right. Yes, dark indeed. In fact, we didn't put on the list big cuts to NASA, which to me seems to be a conflict of interest with Mr. Musk and his SpaceX program. We also have Pell Grants that they're talking about doing away with or severely paring back. Students that need to go to school, that want to go to school, even if it's to community college, they're talking about trying to get rid of some of those Pell Grants that a lot of Americans, young Americans, rely on in order to fund their education. So thank you, Jay. Appreciate that. Ben, discussion about elimination of the Department of Education or discussion from Trump and Musk about elimination of Department of Energy. I don't know if that registers with middle America, those who are living paycheck to paycheck. I'm not sure they see how that impacts their lives, but I certainly see how cuts to the Veterans Administration budget and certainly SNAP program were referred to now, or used to be referred to as the food stamp program, or Head Start, allowing kids to have a breakfast before they attend school. These are programs that impact a lot of Americans, particularly in the South and the Midwest, those of the lower economic scale. Your thoughts about whether Americans realize that all cuts are going to impact them one way or another. Do you think that registers with them? Because what they're seeing in the headlines is Department of Energy, Department of Education may go away, and they're not really too concerned about that.
Yeah, I think that we've got the old problem of people look at things, and if they're not concerned by it, they say, "Great, wonderful," that cutting that waste over there, and then somebody over another spot looks at their stuff and they say, "Great, they're going to cut it over there," but no one puts it together that all the cuts going on all the way end up cutting for everybody, right? And everybody ends up in a worse position. I saw recently, for example, and it's totally appropriate in this Christmas season, holiday season. It's a wonderful life moment that there's talk about trying to eliminate the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC. Where we go back to the old runs on the bank, and the old, you're insured up to I think $250,000 on your bank account, but we don't need that because it costs money for the banks, and people don't put those things together between what they've been enjoying on a movie and why that situation and the run on the bank was such a fearful thing, and why we have these entities like the FDIC or NOAA to help us deal with issues like, oh, I don't know, hurricanes, all that stuff, trying to act, in addition to climate change, just so I know, I don't think that people put it together. In fact, I saw a really interesting article in the New York Times about, for example, somebody who had voted for Trump and was against the illegal immigrants, and then lo and behold, they find out that their son-in-law would be deported, and they said, "No, it's not for you." I said, "Well, yeah, I'm undocumented, right?" So the person who voted said, "No, they'll stand between me. I'll stand between them and you." No, they didn't. They didn't put it together that this would literally affect their son-in-law and their grandchild. I mean, that is quite stunning if you think about it. I mean, we're not asking for a high-level analysis here, right? They're just so no. I don't think that people really appreciate that all these things that could happen. The other thing that I maybe throw out here, since we have a Silicon Valley kind of guy in Elon Musk, as well as uh, Vivek, there is that one of the things that used to happen all the time in Silicon Valley was something called vaporware. Does anybody remember this with vaporware? It's where a company would announce some incredible technology that was coming, right? And so that technology was coming, so therefore, it would stop investments in the other companies, their competitors, and then the technology would never show up. So, I listen to this $2 trillion, this $500 billion, all that stuff, and I'm saying that you're not even an agency. This is going to be vaporware, because when it comes down to it, I am certain that in Congress they will be with the knives out about protecting what they want. So who will not get protected? Clearly, most likely the poorest people, except to the extent that they get the big agriculture folks who say, keep SNAP, because that's how we make money every year. Is it in buying those cornflakes and things like that? It'll be purely in that kind of, you know, mercantile vision, not anything humanistic. That would be what that'd be too much. It'd be too much. It'll just be mercantile. So yeah, it's I don't think people appreciate it. And it's unfortunate, but here we are.
Well, let me take you down the time machine, the Wayback Machine, back to 1980 and Ronald Reagan's campaign. I mean, for those that did vote for him the first term, they liked what they heard. Cutback of welfare, that their welfare recipients were not earning the money that they got from the federal government. Cut back in Head Start, and the back then it was referred to as the food stamp program. But these things did come to reality, not maybe to the extent that he advertised as a campaign or as a presidential candidate, but they did come true. And those Americans that relied on those programs really got the short end of the stick. And it was, particularly when we were in high unemployment as well. I mean, it was just um, a time where all these programs came together at the wrong time. And Americans were hurting quite badly in the 1980 to 1983 years.
Oh, I remember the '82 recession, which was the last bad recession since, as compared to 2008, and then the one that's coming. I think one is coming, quite honestly. But I agree. Why? Well, the fundamental thing is that things that are being given to, or allocated, or money being spent on poor people, we just flip them into saying, well, we're only going to give it to the truly needy. That was the big term at the time, the truly needy, as opposed to the untruly needy. I don't just, I mean, but oh well, we the loafers, what was it, the welfare queen, and all, I mean, all kinds of tropes. Just like we get tropes today, all kinds of things being thrown out about this, that, or the other, right? Like the Department of Defense is woke, whatever that means, so, you get these mind games, and then people use them as rationalizations for doing really cruel things to the least of us. The other thing I was going to say is that to the extent things get worse for people, which I fear will happen, then what will happen is that, it will play the blame game, and we'll say it's this guy over here, it's this woman over here is causing you the problem. It's not how the whole system is set up. I mean, like, take a look at it right now. They're talking about, not everything is on the table, right? But I don't hear anybody saying, "Oh, tax increases for the rich." Uh, as part of, I mean, if we're going to have everything on the table, let's have everything on the table, right? But but it's all about cuts, 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 right? But in their visions, can you imagine someone like Elon Musk or Vivek uh, imagining recommending tax increases on themselves? Uh, can you imagine the in this current situation where we have serious concerns and investigations going on about SpaceX complying with its obligations with regards to security clearance by Elon Musk being maintained and continuously, and it's not being done by him. All kinds of things like, do you think these people who think they're above everything would really give a care about anybody beneath them? No, they're cruel. They'll just be cruel. That's all. And you know, Trump is kind of the same ilk. Uh, I take Jay's point that you get these guys who will propose all these horrible things, and then Trump will use them as cover, right, to be able to submit some things to Congress that are there. And the cover will be, well, this is the richest man in the world, and these two are the richest men in the world. They know what's going on. They're really business people. That's going to be the cover. And it's like, they are not serious people about these things. They don't understand the ramifications. They don't even understand how budgeting goes. Not to say that I understand budgeting myself, but between appropriation and authorization and all those kind of, they have no clue about how government actually works. And so some part of me feels like this is all kind of vaporware to get us all fearful, right? As part of the whole general strategy of getting everyone fearful that they're trying to put in place, such as these defamation lawsuits that Trump is doing and all that to get the press fearful and all that. It's all about making us compliant and to make us all shut up and not do anything. And the undocumented people trying to deport them, all that is about making people fearful in communities. Which is why I'm going to stand up for a second and put up my T-shirt that I just got. There you go, everybody. Pray
There you
for
go.
foreigners. There we go. There we go. That's just to let everybody American solidarity with foreigners, whether they're legal or undocumented, because it's important to let people know that we respect their human dignity, and it's not the cavalierness with which people talk about these things. The cruelty is unimaginably awful. If you're a Christian, it's unchristian. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll speak to other religions too, but I know as a Christian, it's unchristian.
Let me go to the point that Jay made and you made that I think needs to be brought up again, and that is the ability for a politician to scapegoat some other person to some other group while they're implementing some pretty draconian cuts to the social network safety net. And Ronald Reagan certainly had his advantages when we had international incidents that took away from the domestic cuts. I call it the tail that wags the dog syndrome. We saw that a little bit with George Bush. 9/11 certainly deflected attention off his domestic programs that were failing miserably, and his ratings were woefully low. 9/11 came along and changed his ratings as far as president of the United States, and he was elected easily as a second-term president. So I want to thank you for both of you for saying that there will be some scapegoating, and it's hard to say to what degree we'll see a distraction either on an international basis or environmental issues that will detract from the cuts that are quietly taking place, be it to Social Security, be it to Medicare, be it to Medicaid, or government education grants or whatever. Mark my words, there'll be a distraction. So thank you, Ben. Jay, to you on this point, that Elon Musk has said, hey, look, we have all these big agencies, even the Department of Defense, that has failed to meet their audits. They don't know where the money is. They can't meet their audits. They're not passing these audits. In the case of Department of Defense, 7 audits have been failed. Does Musk and Ramaswamy have a point that maybe these big agencies don't know where the money is coming from and where it's going to?
Couple of thoughts. Number one is they don't have a clue, either of them. They're following the mantra of undermining the government, smaller government, and smaller taxes on the wealthy. And it's very troubling because it reflects what I believe is the main thrust of the sick Republican initiative now, and it's divide and conquer. It's we don't care. Ben made reference to this. By the way, Ben, I think you ought to be president. With Tim, I'm not so sure. Either he's the vice president or maybe the secretary of state. I'm not sure.
So you're the vice president. Yeah.
Dog catcher. That's a dog catcher would be my role.
So, what I'm saying is that this is all driven by this kind of anti-humanist point of view. Divide the country, make everybody hate each other, create as many divisions on as many issues as you can, find scapegoats everywhere, make people argue. My favorite story is January 2017, where there was one crowd opposing Trump, saying, not my president, on one side of Fifth Avenue. And on the other side was a crowd saying something like, he's good, or whatever. And come to find that Vladimir Putin was incentivizing both crowds. He was sending social media just to create a division. It's very easy to create a division. We have seen that if we were watching all over Europe. Brexit was an example of that. And so I'm thinking that these guys, they're on Putin's side. Trump is on Putin's side. They want to divide and conquer. And so everybody gets to hate everybody. And this is what is happening. You could also, connect all the dots of all these initiatives that you're talking about, the cutting initiatives, and find what they want to do is have people dislike the country and dislike each other. This is very troubling. And the question is, what is going to happen in real time on and after January 20th? How are people going to react to this? Because they're going to find they're in deep kimchi, and it's not a happy time. What are they going to do about it? It's not reversible, I would like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to read the comments that were written from our previous show on their efforts to undermine Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And this is a summary, a ChatGPT summary of the 255 comments, and there were an enormous number of people that watched that show on taxes and wealth inequality. Many of the people who commented advocate for higher taxes on billionaires and raising the cap on taxable income for Social Security contributions. Others criticize unfair tax breaks for the wealthy. 2, Social Security and retirement. Numerous users emphasize that Social Security is not an entitlement, but a system people have paid into their entire working lives. They thought they were going to get a benefit out of that. And it was separately stated on their tax forms. This is your contribution to Social Security. This is what you're putting in the bank, your own bank for Social Security. Now we find it's not. Okay. It says there's widespread opposition to raising the retirement age with concern about physical demands on older workers. All true, all a problem. Some highlight the insufficiency of Social Security payments to meet basic living expenses. Hasn't gone up that fast, particularly given the rising costs of living. 3, government spending and priorities. Critics suggest cutting defense spending and congressional salaries before touching Social Security. Many oppose privatization of the program or benefit cuts, stressing its importance for economic stability and retiree survival. Survival. 4, personal testimonies. Retirees and workers share stories about relying on Social Security or pensions, highlighting hardships faced on limited incomes. Several express fear and frustration over proposed cuts or policy changes. 5, political criticism. Comments express distrust in politicians across the board, with some blaming specific parties or figures for financial inequality and threats to Social Security. Several stress that political inaction has exacerbated these issues. 6, policy suggestions. Ideas include taxing oil income for Social Security, reversing tax breaks for the wealthy, and implementing reforms to secure the program's future. 7, and the last one, 7, there is anger, fear, and skepticism about the motivations behind potential cuts to Social Security, as well as calls for unity and resistance against such measures. This discussion reflects deep concerns about economic inequality, the sustainability of Social Security, and dissatisfaction about political leadership. That's all within the last few days, Tim. And
Yeah.
there'll be more. But the point is that people are not happy about this attack on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And, I suggest to you that the Republicans are going to have a hard time at the midterms because they're going to have to deal with this. And if he does it, it's going to be terrible for people, for the country. If these cuts take place, the country is going to be a different and much worse place by the time of the midterms. If he doesn't do it, well, I think the Democrats can show again that he lies, that he throws the dead cat on the table, that he is not a serious president. And these people who he has appointed are not serious members of his team. These two guys are not serious at all. DOGE is not serious at all. Ramaswamy is not serious. And you can look at his face and you can see that Elon Musk is not serious.
Okay, thank you. Picking up on Jay's thought about these cuts, Ben, if defense is approximately 40% of the national debt, and then we have 10% of the national debt that we have to pay. We have to pay all the T-bills and the bonds that we put out there, and make sure that we honor our debts and pay those debts. So that's 10%. So now you look at Social Security, you look at Medicare, you look at Medicaid. That's coming up with roughly 30 to 35%. If Donald Trump and Musk and Ramaswamy want to cut $2 trillion out, where's it come from? I mean, there can't be that much fraud, abuse, and waste to come up with $2 trillion.
I think that when there are these analyses that are done in a lot of settings, the analyses tend to show that the administrative costs for a number of things tend to be very low for the government as compared to in the private sector. For one simple reason, which is that the government doesn't try to run a profit. I mean, it's really, I mean, that's one part of it. I keep in mind, I think that if I remember right, federal employees right now are like 0.6% of the total US population. And I think at the time of around Ronald Reagan or so, it was 2.5%. So what we've been doing, we've been slicing back the federal government. And then to do things, what we've been doing is outsourcing to contractors, independent contractors. So we're paying people to do what we maybe could have had done internally for less. That's really part of the gravy train that is going on here for people who get to be in those consulting type roles. The other thing that I want to say is that the profligate, so-called profligate federal government, all right? Does anybody remember the fraud that was done on the PPP campaign programs and all that? The amounts of money that they found were given to people improperly, or I mean, there were enormous amounts of fraud, and one of the reasons for that was that the actual drafting of the law made it easier to do fraud. I wonder how that happened. I wonder how that happened. And then who are the fraudsters? Who are the people who come up with the angle? They, the idea that the federal government is spending all this money, and then you look at who's actually trying to get that money out of the federal government in any way, shape, or form they can get it, is something that doesn't get talked about. It's like, exactly how is the private sector operating in terms of this space? in terms of being respectful of norms that are required,
Mhm.
or even accounting practices that are required. I mean, there are processes in the federal government, and I can remember, particularly remembering somebody in the Department of Defense. It was like for a contract in the war in Iraq for something, and it was a $7 billion contract, and it was being put under a no bid vision, which is only allowed under the regulations for certain narrow kinds of emergency situations, right? So everything was being declared to be an emergency so that somebody could get this $7 billion contract, no bid, right? The person who's supposed to sign off on that, she refused to sign off on it because she didn't see why it was the emergency. Therefore, it went under the no bid as opposed to the bid, right? Well, guess what? She had significant people above her pressuring her to sign in the federal government because they had ties to these folks on the outside, right? It's that kind of stuff that doesn't get talked about here. And they're talking about the federal government is, it's like who's getting a piece of the action? Who's getting a piece of the action? But the
Well,
thing is, those are the big numbers. Then I just want to say the small numbers, meaning that the amount of money somebody gets is minor for somebody who's in poverty line or just around the poverty line. It's not that much money for them. It just happens to be a lot of them, but it's not much money they get. But they're surviving, and that's the word, Jay. They're surviving with this help.
Mhm.
While these guys at the top are sitting here, going up into space, talking about going to Mars and all that, while people down here on Earth are suffering in the United States of America, let alone around the world. And there, I'm looking for somebody to say, hey, I'll take my $200 billion and I'll give it to take care of poor people. There's a concept, right? As opposed to sitting there on my pile and being Mr. Forbes or something. I'll take my $50 billion and give it, whatever the number is for these 400 Forbes types. I'm happy to give it away. Not just to my kids, not to get some lawyer to come up with some fancy trick so that I don't have to pay taxes on it. I'll pay my share.
back in the robber baron days,
That's where we are, Tim. We're back in the robber baron days.
right.
We're back
So
into these unholy consolidations, where if you we're back to trust, we need antitrust. We need Teddy Roosevelt.
Mhm.
We need somebody to break up these big combinations. They're huge and they're powerful, and they carry with them this notion of the bottom line is all. And what they are saying to the business community is, if you can rip off the public, go for it, because we're not going to regulate you. If you can take a slice of everything and be incredibly wealthy, I mean, to me, it's kind of an abuse to find that the CEO of an organization is making so much more money than the guy on the floor of the factory. That really is wrong, but it's going to get worse. I think the message that these guys are sending is, if you're wealthy or close to wealthy, we're going to help you. We're not going to regulate you. We're going to look the other way when we find you're involved in corruption. We're looking for an oligarchy, and it's going to, emerge that way, and nobody can stop it, and they're not going to stop it. This is really a destruction of call it the democratic capitalism that the country has established after World War II, and I am very worried about that.
you had millionaires. They weren't billionaires back then. They were millionaires, multimillionaires, Rockefeller, Carnegie, but they were kind of shamed into putting their money out to the public good for the betterment of society. And they did that. I mean, look at all the Carnegie libraries that were put out, and the Rockefeller, multiple organizations that are still in existence today and being funded. Then we fast forward to Bill Gates and his foundation, and you guys are going to have to help me. The Oracle of Omaha, who is our multi-billionaire who has
Warren Buffett.
Thank you, Warren Buffett. These guys are doing their thing, but I don't see Musk, or I don't see Ramaswamy being part of that ilk. I mean, I just don't see them being that kind of person.
These guys aren't enough. They're iconic, and we know about them. We hear about them, and on their own account, they give money through their foundations, but they're not enough. The only one that can deal with 230, 240 million people in the country is the government. That's the notion of democracy. We collaborate to solve common problems.
Right.
And it's nice that these guys give some charity, but that's not nearly enough.
Enough.
Government has to help us.
Yeah, and there is this vision, I think, in these particularly well-off persons, that anything that is being given to a fellow citizen who is not doing so well in the system is charity. They look at everything as opposed to part of having a democratic structure where we take care of all of each other, right? They look at it as just charity, and that's their part of their disdain for those who don't have as much money for them, right? Now, I would also say that I once worked for somebody who's told me that, there's certain people that you really don't care about having their respect. Okay. Just think about that as an attitude that if you don't care about the poor people, you don't care if they respect you or not. You just don't care. The middle class, you don't care that person in Mansfield, Ohio, because you've got all your money. Just think of that attitude that, that it's there, folks. It's there, and for some reason, the people sit here and they glorify these people, and they maybe have a few who like window dressing, like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, who try to sort of look like they're good persons. But on the whole, it's like it's a whole bunch of people up there with not much there. There's just a little window dressing. It's pitiful. It's pitiful, and it's cruel, and it's unfortunate, and it's dangerous.
It's dangerous for our society for sure. Okay, Ben, thank you. We're out of time, but I do want to just remind us what the title of this show was and then ask for your last comments. Again, the title was Trump's Department of Government Efficiency Will Hurt, coming to a small town near you. And with that title, Jay, your last thoughts on this topic.
Tim, Ben, it's already hurting. He's not the president, and but he's acting like the president, and he is sending out all these signals and messages that we are going to cut government back, we're going to cut regulation back, we're going to cut the social safety net back, we're going to cut education back, we're going to cut all these things that the country relies on for its civil society. We're going to cut all that back because we don't care. We don't care about you. We only care about us. And we are going to make, in the way of an oligarchical corruption, we're going to take all the money. And this is very troubling because it's a one-way street. I don't know how you get back from this. And, to the extent that we were the city on the hill, we aren't now. He's sending these messages all over the world. He's sending these messages to Wall Street, to Europe, to Africa and Latin America. He's sending them everywhere. He's not even the president. Biden is like invisible. And so I think, what's happening is we're already in it. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I am very concerned that when you look next, you're going to find a country, and next could be before January 20th, you're going to find a country that has changed its attitude about the very things we've discussed today.
Thank you, Jay. Ben, your final thoughts.
At the end of the day, I mean, Jay, I think is exactly right. It's already happening. And at the end of the day, you're going to have more sick people, more starving people, and more dying people. We've already started to see that in some particular places with regards to women, with regards to in the places where the women's health care is not being respected. And they're having horrendous things happen to that really are unnecessary, but uh, it's horrific already, and it's just unfortunately it's just unless people get up and do something about it. I mean, really try to get something done, um, non-violently, but get something done. That's what you're going to have. There's just a lot more sick people, a lot more starving people, and a lot more people dying. It's just awful.
Good points. Gentlemen, thank you for your comments. We're out of time. I'd like to thank my special esteemed guest, Ben Davis, and my co-host, Jay Fidell, for an engaging discussion. I'm Tim Apicella, your host for American Issues Take One. Aloha.